What's going on, everybody? Martino Puccio here today to discuss another Milan topic, and this time, yet again, it concerns Jerry Cardinale. But before I get into all of that, just want to say thank you guys so much for the support. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on all your audio platforms, as well as our social media accounts on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. So please, once again, we appreciate your support. So again, let's get into it. So Harvard's Business School published a 24-page document. It covered everything regarding Milan with Jerry Cardinale and Giorgio Furlani. So shout out to Ali Fisher, all the guys at SempreMilan.com. The link for the article is going to be in the description. I really just wanted to comment on Jerry's overall comments, not just within the article, but specifically pertaining to Milan in the short term and long term, and some of the decisions that he has made so far, and the hirings between Zlatan Furlani, and then obviously yesterday Beppe Marotta's comments that made Cardinale basically look like an idiot and make Milan look even worse than they already do, and that's really difficult to do in this moment in time, and yet Jerry Cardinale did that with ease. So let's get into it, guys, right? The early part was basically discussing about the process of buying Milan and you know, some of the things and comments that he got from certain people about investing in European football, and specifically Italy, and the difficulties that it brings up, you know, in terms of stadium building. The amount of revenue that all the clubs bring in is incomparable when it comes to the Premier League, which is a massive giant, and honestly a couple of other leagues, and that's simply because of stadium finances, a bunch of other things with Italy. We won't get into that today. But again, we'll get into some of these comments. Again, the hiring of Giorgio Furlani. So we'll just go into a real quick quote here. I could have hired someone with a casting call in European football, basically someone with a football background, something that Furlani does not have, as we all know very well. But he thinks the way that we think at Redbird, aka he understands the fiscal side of things and making difficult decisions, many of which the Milanisti disagree with. And we'll get into some of those. But let's get into the comments on Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Most people would see this appointment as a showcasing, or think of me as a celebrity-loving owner. It's the exact opposite. I'm looking for world-class people who can make us better. Again, mind you, this guy sacked Paolo Maldini. Anyways, continuing with the Zlatan comments. With Zlatan, I wanted to make a statement that we will do things differently because there is a legitimate need for innovation in managing these resources better. That's kind of a shot at Maldini and previous management because they didn't really use their resources that great, probably referencing letting players walk for free, Hakan, Kessie, Donnarumma, just to name a few of those, right? And then he kind of gets into the media pressure and how he stopped reading newspapers in Italy because they post a lot of fictitious things. That may and well be true, but there is some warranted criticism out there in the Italian newspapers. But again, I'm not completely defending the newspapers. I'm not defending Cardinale here. I will say part of what he is saying is true. There is a lot of fictitious stuff that they do post out there that are different from Jerry, just overall topics in general. Again, the sale of Sandro Tonali. So this is where it really starts to get interesting. We didn't sell him to Newcastle because we needed to. We sold him because we got a great offer and we did a risk-reward assessment, which is, again, these types of terms a lot of footy fans, including yourself, Milanisti, really hate. And I know you guys do. Comment on what you think of some of these words from Cardinale. We got 70 million, including bonuses, plus a 10 million earnout, the highest ever in Serie A. So he's already boasting about how much money this sale had brought in for the club. And thanks to that sale, we bought 6 new players, completely revamped the squad. We don't sell out of necessity, we sell out of opportunism. Meaning, if the sale and the offer is too good, we will not turn it down. Something that a lot of Milan fans don't agree with because it kind of signals a lot of things from the past, right? When Zlatan and Thiago Silva both left because the offers were astronomical. But does that actually help Milan reach the eighth Champions League, and not only on top of that, the 20th Scudetto? I'm inclined to think no. And now we get into some more comments about the stadium here. So this is great, okay? We could significantly refurbish our existing stadium, aka San Siro, or build a new one that reflects the current status of these clubs as live entertainment companies. Calling Milan and Inter live entertainment companies isn't exactly incorrect, but that is nothing that you ever want to hear the owner of AC Milan comment them as, because it just sounds like they're a business. They are a business at the end of the day. There's no denying that. But don't talk about the club like they're just some ATM machine, because that kind of sounds what it's like here, Jerry. It doesn't sound like you're actually playing up to the fans and talk about what you have as a club. It's more than just an entertainment company. It's a lot more than that. And you should have known that when you bought the club. We know you don't. So, unfortunately, these are the comments that we're getting, and they just come across as completely tone deaf to what the club actually is and the tradition that is involved in it. You just celebrated 125 years. When they were founded 125 years ago by Herbert Kilpin, they were not viewed as an entertainment company. They got this big and successful for reasons opposite of that. Again, it has to do with ambition, very much so not rooted in Jerry's words, but there were some positive comments about the stadium that I did agree with him, and I think that should be given some respect here. Building stadiums in Italy is a challenge. The last stadium that was built in 2011 had 40,000 seats. I would love to see a modern stadium built with 70,000 seats. So at least we're kind of on the same page where Jerry has his vision for the stadium, that he wants to have it twice the size of what Juve have, essentially. It'll be a little bit smaller than San Siro. Certain parts of San Siro are closed off, but 70,000 seats, I think that's something we can all get behind if Milan were to get a new stadium. I completely agree with Jerry here, but that's pretty much where it stops. So let's get on to his plans for Milan. He says, I'm not trying to Americanize Milan. I'm trying to introduce some American elements that can take Milan to the next level in a constructive way. Okay, so not the worst comments so far, but let's keep going. I'm also focusing more attention on Serie A. I'm curious to see how we can help them negotiate international media deals. Okay, Jerry, not too bad. Good idea, because guess what? Serie A, Italy, all of Calcio, they don't make enough money, and I think the comments here, yet again, are fair. To be fair to Jerry, these are fair comments. In the US, there's a different relationship between team owners and the league. Here, there's more levels to it. And he's right once again. There's a lot of BS. Serie A, the Federation, FIFA, UEFA, so on and so forth is what he goes on to comment about. I think he has a valid point here yet again. But like I was saying, this is kind of where it stops. So let's get into Jerry's comments on the short term and long term. And this is where he ruffles a lot of feathers with myself and a lot of other fans. So, again, winning championships is obviously an important goal, but you have to balance that with winning smart. Inter won a Scudetto last year and then went bankrupt. This was in reference to them having to sell the team, as Ali and Sempre Milan comment on it. The reference is to an insolvent former owner in Suning, obviously Steven Zhang, who did a tremendous job, I think, of keeping Inter competitive while also dealing with a lot of financial issues, which is very true. I don't believe Inter went bankrupt in the way that he did, and that's what basically caused Beppe Marotta to comment on what he did, and we'll get into those final comments very soon, and we'll wrap up the video there. And Jerry continues, for the fans, my job is to win the Italian championship every year. I get that. For my investors who are focused on bottom line appreciation, my job is to position Milan to challenge for the Scudetto every year, qualify for the Champions League every year, go as far into the Champions League as possible. He didn't say win the Champions League, so that, I hate, negative comment. It's not positive enough. That maximizes cash flow and brand value. Again, another line and sentence which makes sense when you're talking to Harvard Business School, but when those words are out there as the Milan principal owner, you're skipping out on the 125th anniversary party. Yet again, it looks bad. It doesn't look good. It's never going to look good if you continue down these paths of comments that are largely tone deaf, just like pretty much everything on the short and long-term goals. And the final comment begins to wrap up. It's the consistency and lower amplitude in the performance volatility that maximizes value and ultimately longevity. To translate that into basic English for you guys is he's trying to find a way to do Moneyball and not spend that much money and have Milan super successful, competitive, and winning in the best way possible without spending like drunken sailors, meaning Milan not spending 300 million every summer, spending 50 to 100 million on X players, so on and so forth. To me, even if you do think like that, don't comment on it. You don't have to. You don't have to. It feels like every single time Jerry is making these comments, there are business conferences, talking to Bloomberg News and their business side of things. And once again, with Harvard Business School, everything is business. And I get it. It's true. Milan are a business. It's multi-billion dollars involved here with the leagues, the club itself, and that's all well and true. But sometimes when you hear your owner only talk about them in that manner and you're getting accused of being frugal in a sense and unambitious, your comments sort of align with what people are accusing you of being. And that's, quite frankly, cheap. And not to say that I don't completely agree with the fans. I do agree with the fans on a large level. But I also disagree with the fans in saying that we should just be spending a ton of money. I personally don't agree with that. However, I do think you have to spend a lot of money eventually on certain players to go towards a greater goal. And with that, I think you can kind of see that sort of balance with Inter. Inter take more risks. They go for it when there's free agents and their wage demands might be a little high on certain players. Marcus Thuram, Hakan Çalhanoğlu. Two players, by the way, who... One, Thuram could have played for Milan. Milan didn't offer as much money as Inter did. Inter offered a better project on top of it because they hire a better manager in Simone Inzaghi, so they got Thuram. Milan obviously had Hakan Çalhanoğlu in their backyard, playing for the club for a few years. Obviously, they didn't want to pay him for what he thought he was worth. Inter said, sure, we'll pay you that amount. They come in, they plug him in to their lineup despite all their financial difficulties, which have been well documented. And Inter do what? They become massively successful. They win their second star. Now, this is where we get into some of the comments made yesterday by Beppe Marotta. I quote tweeted this on my channel as well. So let's get into it. Nima Rudsari translated this. He's from the Italian football podcast on sempreinter.com. So this was the best translation of what Beppe Marotta had said. I'm going to link the tweet in the description of the video. It probably won't be able to fit on the screen here, but I'm just going to read off what Nima had translated. So these are in response to Jerry Cardinale's comments. I didn't want to say anything. However, now I think the time has come to respond. These statements are out of line, disrespectful of the image of the club. I think Cardinale is confused. It is true that these last few years, our majority shareholders have had financial difficulties. However, already of a couple years ago, they were supported by Oaktree, who now own the club. Oaktree, obviously a hedge fund investment, private equity firm that does help out with Inter now. They control the entire club. They took them over from Suning. Again, the comments continue. However, Inter's management is a completely different matter. We comply with FFB, with the national licenses who are very rigid with the respect to the financial criteria, meaning Inter was pretty much falling in line with this. Inter were, I think, a ticking time bomb in my own opinion, but they've stabilized the situation, and he mentions it here. We have gone from an annual loss of 246 million euro per year to 36 million euro. All the while, they won the Supercoppa and the Scudetto, beating Milan. He didn't add this, beating Milan 6 straight times, embarrassing them. So despite the fact that Jerry and a lot of people at Milan like to boast about how great revenues are and how healthy the club is, Inter's still winning in a worse financial situation. Isn't that funny how that works? And Inter are going to be fine based on their trajectory right now with their finances. So, very funny to me. And the final comment is the dagger in the back, in the jugular, whatever part of your body that you get killed with. Here's the final comment from Beppe. And since it's Christmas, I'll also add a little bit of irony. We have won the second star and we're the only club in Milan to achieve that. It's the biggest slap in the face, publicly, that Milan could get from their own rivals and cousins, an entity in which they share a stadium with. And it's not a guarantee that Milan won't be sharing a stadium with Inter, or if they decide to go on their own. Again, I think these are just tone-deaf comments from Cardinale. Regardless if these interviews took place in April of 2024, they aged terribly. You shouldn't be commenting on other clubs' financial situations if you do not own said team. You should not be commenting on the club that is clearly better than you and more financially, I wouldn't say stable, but smarter about the way they gamble with things, right? Because Milan do not take the risk that Inter take. Inter take more risks, And with that, they end up winning more because they do a great job of taking those risks. Now, it's not to say that Cardinale's ideology is completely wrong. I don't completely disagree with it, right? Because we saw what Chinese ownership Leonardo had done with really poor spending. It got Milan into this situation itself. Same goes for Berlusconi. However, none of those ownerships at that point in time really had the stability that Milan currently have, where you're able to take risks. Milan still refused to do that. There were comments made by Furlani about 50 million euro players and how much the risk is involved with those types of signings. And I'm just here to say, on a final note regarding risks, regarding signings, everything is a risk. Everything you do in life is a risk. You go outside, a plane might fall on top of your head and you might be done for. Okay? You could sign a player for 5 million euro. He could tear his ACL one day and he would be nothing for the rest of his career. That's just a 5 million euro risk. Or you could sign a 50 million euro player and he could do the same thing. But they could also do the same thing in terms of the opposite. You could sign a 50 million euro player and he could be the best player that you had signed since Kaká or God knows when. Or you could sign a player for 30 million euro like Giorgio Furlani liked to comment on, saying they're more safe. Why are they more safe? Why is that a guarantee? Arguably the biggest flops recently for Milan have been 35 million euro signings. Paqueta, Piontek, and Andre Silva and Charles de Ketelaere. 4 names around that 35 million euro vicinity that absolutely flopped at Milan, ended up being poor signings. But to me, that's just very funny because there's plenty of other signings like an Andrea Bartolacci, signed for around 18 million euro for Milan years ago, ended up being a complete flop. It doesn't matter, okay? What matters is your scouting. What matters is the fit with the club. And does this player fit the mold of what we want to build for the future, no matter the cost? I'm not saying spend 100 million euro on a player. I know that's not feasible for Milan. We all know that's not feasible. But again, an example like Alessandro Buongiorno, he's available for 40 million euro. You're bragging about the highest revenues in years for Milan, in years, and you decide not to spend. Jerry, do us all a favor as Milan fans. And I say this as someone who doesn't have as much vitriol and anger towards you as many others do. Stop commenting on things. Don't say anything, in fact, until you've won something. Because right now, you're only doing more damage to the image for the club, for the PR of the club, which is synonymous with what I just said. And in turn, that's going to lower the value of the club. Because Milan are going to continue to be worse and fall short of expectations because you want to cut corners and do things your way currently. That's not going to work in the long run. And in the long run, it's going to cost you more money. Because if you miss out on top 4, you don't qualify for the Champions League, you don't bring in that revenue, your revenue goes down. And with that, players don't want to join a project in which you can't qualify for the Champions League. Because the best players want to play in the biggest competitions. And if you can't guarantee that, then you can't guarantee winning. You can't guarantee winning. You're going to be keeping a lot of fans on the outside. And they're not going to want to watch your team. They're not going to show up. And they're not going to support. And quite frankly, I think they have the right case for that. Because it's a lot of their hard-earned money. The ultras are against you. The casual fans and the normal fans that watch from afar are not backing you right now. God knows who is backing you and not backing you within the club. You need to stabilize the situation. Comments like this to Harvard Business School, regardless of what your outlook and future for the club is, do not help the situation. It's best if you stay quiet, and you're probably not going to heed my advice. You're probably not even going to watch this video. The fact is, Jerry, you have to understand what you bought. And if you don't understand what you bought, you're going to cost yourself a lot more money. Because as of right now, Milan's trajectory is the complete opposite in which you bought it. Because of your inability to stabilize the project and be a stable figurehead in this team and this club. So unfortunately with that, that's where we leave you on this Christmas Eve. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Kind of me giving my thoughts. I understand if it got a little dull at one point in time. But seeing these comments from the owner of the club that we love so much every single time, it's too much of a negative. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below of this entire situation. Again, Milan play Roma this coming weekend, so be sure to look out for that. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere. That Milan Podcast, Apple, Spotify. Follow us all over social media. The links will be in the description of the video. Other than that, take care, guys.